Do you ever see a successful woman on your feed or in a magazine and think, wow, it must be nice to have it so easy? Well, think again. Behind that glossy cover or smiling face is a ton of hard work, countless failures, and endless learning experiences. I'm Rebecca Minkoff, and I'm here to tell you that success isn't a walk in the park. It takes grit, resilience, and a willingness to take risks. That's why I created Superwomen, a podcast that peels back the varnish and gets into the nitty-gritty of what it takes to make it as a woman in today's world. From luminaries and game changers to women you've never heard of but should, this podcast is here to inspire you to take your next leap, no matter how daunting it may seem. We'll explore the sacrifices these women have made, the highs and lows they've experienced, and the lessons they've learned along the way. So if you're ready to be inspired and learn from some of the most successful women out there, join me on Superwomen. Together, we'll uncover the stories behind the successes and prove that with hard work, determination, and a little bit of luck, anything is possible. Hey everyone, you are listening to Superwomen. Today's guest is the incredible Nayeema Raza, formerly at the New York Times. She also had been show running an incredible podcast, then became the co-host of it. You've heard of many of the shows she's worked on. She's a documentary filmmaker, and she just recently left a month ago to start her own podcast, Smart Girl, Dumb Questions, where she explores with full curiosity all the things that maybe we've been too scared to ask or have consulted our phone first, from people like Mark Cuban to these adorable little kids who are way too worried about their careers at 11. She asked the questions that we are all dying to know. Take a listen as we talk through career reinvention, what it was like to leave a very comfortable relationship at age 30 and move to New York City, and how she views what's a dumb question or not dumb enough question to ask. Tune in. Nayeema, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Rebecca. I'm so excited to talk to you.
I'm excited because you are a month into your career reinvention. You launched your podcast, Smart Girl, Dumb Questions. And I would love to have you, before we talk about that, I want to go back. You've had so many careers. And before we started recording, you were talking about reinvention. And I'd love to start with your first career. And when did you know it was time to change? And where did that bravery come from?
Bravery is a generous word for it, maybe.
Or naivety, stupidity,
exactly.
all of the above.
So, yeah, I mean, I've been, I've had 15 years of career after college, and I've kind of split it into 3 chunks, and they've each lasted about 5 years, I would say. So my first career was right after my undergraduate at Georgetown. I was doing political reform work at a consultancy. So I was living in places like Vietnam, Libya, Jordan, and working on kind of massive government reform projects with a US company called the Monitor Group. And what really, when I started my job, and this is the case every one of these chapters, when I started that career, it's like I was good at it because I loved the thing I was doing. And after a few years, I loved it because I was good at it. And that comfort is kind of always my clue that it's time to just unlock the next thing, and I think a lot of people, we struggle with this because like you're doing something and you become good at it. And so much of, career is mastery and experience. But I've started thinking about my career much less as like a ladder and much more of like, and not even as cliff jumping, which I've heard that analogy, but much more as like a spiral staircase. Like you constantly want to be growing, but you might not be on the same incline at all times, and it's really the breadth of it that gives me joy, learning something new.
So where does the lack of fear come in to change? Because I meet so many women who are like, I have to get to here in my life, and then I'm comfortable, and then I don't want to go anywhere because the unknown is scarier. So let me just stay where it's nice and I'm bubble wrapped.
Yeah. It's probably like my lack of bubble wrapping. One, I grew up like with a lot of change. My dad was a diplomat. He was at the World Bank. And so I grew up in Asia and Africa and moving, a lot as a kid and going to international schools and having to, adapt a lot as a kid. So for me, that is my nature. Actually, what's scary for me is stability, right? And that explains why I'm not like, it's like, that explains a lot, including my dating life. But what's scary for me is like staying in one place and being grounded. And so I think there's that. I think, I'm feel really lucky. I have parents that gave me a lot of confidence, probably too much confidence for my competence, but it's great. It's served me well. And then I think also part of it is just like not hitting your milestones, right? Like I had been in relationships from when I was 16 to 30. And then at 31, I decided to break up with my boyfriend who I was living with in San Francisco. And that decision was like really scary because, he was a great person. A lot of things worked. And yet I felt really resigned to my life. And I felt we'd gotten together when I was like 27, and I was like, well, I should just marry this guy because you feel this intense pressure in your late 20s. And I think, actually having failed at that milestone that we as women are taught that by 30 you should really like lock it in and have kids, et cetera. I'm like, oh, great. That liberated these years in my 30s to like really try new things in a big way.
What are some of the things you're trying in a big way?
I think I started producing, I made documentaries and film, and I started doing that in the context of that relationship. But then in more recent years, I've started like being my own voice, hosting, et cetera. So I went from, producing and editing Kara Swisher and like being a co-host that was on air for the top and tail of shows, and then to co-hosting full shows, to having my own show that I'm, branded myself. And my new show is really me in a podcast. It's like a curiosity party. It's the art of not knowing. It's like my voice unadulterated. And that was scary to, it's just always scary having people watch your work, and it's different. Like, I had a film at Tribeca in 2019. And it was so cool to watch people like laugh when you want to laugh, but it's not you. It's not your face on the screen. It's not your thing. And so for me, starting this thing and doing it and like having that act start in my late 30s or mid 30s is like scarier because like now all of a sudden I'm going to be also like aging on camera or on podcast or whatever for the world to see for the next years. And so that's just the reality of it. But I also think it's fun, and I wish I had, it's like sometimes I'm like, oh, I should have started this sooner. I'm so behind, and then I catch myself thinking that, and I like want to slap myself because it's just like everything got you to this point, but
right.
Still.
It's interesting that you say you're going to see yourself aging. I feel that way. Like, am I going to be the old lady still doing social media shoots for my brand? But it's having said that you like change and that that's more stable for you, the constant change. How do you know that this is going to be something you're going to love and want to do and that you won't in 5 years want to change?
Well, I mean, maybe I'll start aging before the next 5 years, but that's
I doubt
generous. It. I mean, how do you, I do want to actually just like ask you about what you just said. Do you actually worry about that? Being the old lady that's on social media? I mean, you're not an old lady, but.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Like, am I going to do this when I'm 60? I was kind of thinking through like, if the brand is still around, which I hope it is, like, do you want to see an old lady with a cane on the street? I mean, maybe not at 60, I'm exaggerating, but my head of social was like, you know what? There's a whole group of elderly women that have extraordinary careers on Instagram. Not that my career is Instagram based, but it's really about being real to my consumer. And so that's why I'm forward facing. But
yeah, and being disintermediated to your consumer, right? Like you're not in a glossy magazine, you're living your life out there. And yeah, it's funny. I have I used to write at New York Magazine. I feel like I have this essay in me that's like, I hate everyone on Instagram, especially myself. It's like, but the thing I will say, the people that I hate the least on Instagram, or the people I don't hate on Instagram, are the old people, like the grandfluencers.
Yes.
And people who post their parents. Like when I post about my dad, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. But every time I post about him, I feel like he's like famous from the grave. Like people love my dad content. Like they're so excited for old people content. So I almost think we'll be better influencers, Rebecca, when we hit that stage.
As we start aging.
But I don't know that I'll be doing this for years. I think that this show is so comfortable for me that like it's in a good way. Like I'm learning so much, and it's really like I feel like I'm in my living room kind of asking questions and, practicing the art of not knowing. And in a world where we have been taught to treat curiosity almost like pornography, like Google it in the privacy of your own home at dark, and then have an opinion about everything like that all of a sudden, like whether it's like a foreign language item on your menu that you're supposed to understand, or like a foreign war you're supposed to have a point of view on right away. And so I think what I'm doing on the show will kind of continue as an arc. Who knows how long?
Well, I love that. I love even the title of it because I'll never forget. I should have known what this was, but in a business meeting, like the fourth board meeting I was at, where I was scrolling Instagram and they were talking and I was tuning out, and they kept saying EBITDA, 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 and I was like, I don't know what the fuck this means, and I just found like, what does this word mean that you keep saying? And this was years ago, but it really got
Yeah.
me to go like, oh, I have to understand business. I have to understand the language of business, and uh,
Yeah.
and it's like, those are the dumb questions. Like you said, you secretly Google it because you're
Yeah.
ashamed. Like if we could all just if we could ask more dumb questions, you know,
Yes.
we'd be a
We
lot
should
further
make them
along.
communal.
Yes, we should.
Exactly. Like it's like we should be in community around our curiosities is the idea of the show. And like, and I love that. I'm sure there was someone else in the meeting who's like, oh my God, thank God Rebecca asked what
No,
Eva is because
there
I did
was no
not.
one else in the
It was
meeting.
all suits. It was
It was
suits and
all
you.
suits. They
But
all
we've
knew
all
exactly what
been
they were.
in that meeting where someone
Yeah.
just asked a question like, what's that acronym or why is that a good analogy? And like I'm like, oh my God, thank God for that brave person who just showed me the way to do that, you know? And one of the things I do, and you'll know this when you come on the show, it's like I ask my guest at the end of every episode what they're dumb about. So like Mark Cuban, you know, I'm only 4 episodes in, but Mark Cuban had this question. Like, he's like, why do people chew with their mouth open when it's really annoying? I'm like, okay, Mark. And Neil deGrasse Tyson had a question about cranes. And so the other day I went out on the streets of New York and I filmed a follow-up episode that will run where I found a construction worker and I'm like, do you know the astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson who runs Hayden Planetarium? He has a question for you. And it's so cool because everyone can learn something from anyone, you know?
I love that. I'm curious to hear your perspective. You were show running podcasts that are hugely successful. Then you were hosting beginning and end. Then, you were co-hosting. So you know how to make a compelling show.
Mm-hmm.
You know the ins and outs of that whole world. So maybe that's comfortable, but I'd like you to talk through the uncomfortable part of, this is now mine and I'm an entrepreneur and I got to make this work because this is how I'm paying the bills. And the pressure of that maybe had been different when it wasn't your dime.
That is the big difference. It is my dime and I'm paying people and I want to be able to pay people well and recognize them for their work. And the thing is, Rebecca, I'm like, I hate admin. I hate admin. Like it's tax season and I'm like, have I gotten my accountant the paperwork still? Like, as it's April tomorrow. So that has been the hard part for me, getting organized around it. Bizarrely, I do have an MBA, but I feel that I was always more into the kind of touchy-feely parts of that than the practical part. So that's been scary. What's really scary is like health insurance. I'm like, oh, after my Cobra expires, how am I going to do this? Like I really like that gives me a sense that like by October, this thing needs to be like banging, And I've had to ask for a lot of help. I've like, leaned on like people who know more than me and like really tested. I spent a lot of time before. This wasn't like I woke up one day. I was like, I'm going to make this show. I had a lot of help from a lot of people. And I came up with this idea of like the sponsored dumb question, which I came up with my friend Michael Dubin, who had done the Dollar Shave Club. He had that viral ad, et cetera. And so I have a sponsored dumb question. And then I went out to brands. And at first I was going to lean on other people to do this for me. Like I talked to business managers. I have a representation from having done documentary and film work. And what I found was that like I could just sell myself and my idea more than anyone else can. I don't know if you had that experience when you were starting off, but it's like I needed to
I
really
still have that experience. I'm still doing my own deals most of the time.
And it's hard, right? Like Gretchen Rubin, who has that show and talks, she has the Happiness Project. She asked me recently if I don't suffer from overcompetence. And I thought she said overconfidence, but she's like, no, overcompetence. And I'm like, I don't think I'm not necessarily better or competent at everything. It's just that I am at the end of the day, like I have become an artist. I am an artist. Like I like making films and TV. And so it's hard for me to have things done not in the way that I want them to, or not be represented in the way. And so particularly when I'm talking to brand sponsors, I want to be really honest about what the show is and isn't, and like make sure that they're very aligned and want to grow with me. And I've had great partners like Noom and Tinder and Doc Bill and Omidyar and others who've kind of come in early and like taken a bet on me.
How do you continue to advocate for yourself? Like, do you feel at any times, you said your parents instilled you with a ton of confidence? Maybe too much is what you said.
Yeah.
how do you sort of approach, are there areas of your life where you're not confident, or if you're in a sales meeting and you're like pushing and they're like, I don't know, you just started, like where do you sort of land with that?
Yeah, I feel like, of course, there are areas of my life where I'm not confident. And I was just having this conversation on my show with Tamsin Fidel, and I said to her, I was like, I think part of the reason I'm so driven in my career is because I have not had kids. And I think if you are a woman who's 35 and hasn't had kids yet, and I froze my eggs and all this stuff years ago, and I did all that, but I do think that that pushes me to really be more confident and to take great leaps and be fearless in this part of my life, right? Where I have quote unquote more control. It doesn't always feel like that, because when you're making a thing, it's kind of like, do people like it? Do they want to watch it? Is it going to take off? There's artistry and craft, and you can make it compelling, but like whether or not things are successful is like in the eye of the beholder these days, in particular, with algorithms, et cetera. And yeah, there are certainly parts where and there are parts where I'm like, I mean, a couple episodes into the show, I was like, did I just really start this? And now I'm going to do this every week. I mean, it was really, although I had a year to think about it, when I decided to like pull the switch, I just went within a month, you know, and I hadn't booked anything. I hadn't pre-taped a bunch of episodes, but I just had great people around me that like have convinced me and given me like that, have continued, even after the death of my father, to like give me that confidence that and that has been amazing. And I think that's just like part of the joy of living in New York, is like vibrant community and people who are, so driven for their own dreams that they're driven for yours as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And so you made the move from San Francisco when you were 30?
31.
31. Okay.
Yeah.
So I just came off a 4-episode collab. I don't even what you want to call it, with Candace Bushnell. She's Sex in the City. And, the goal of that podcast was sort of celebrating both of us having 20 years, but also she really inspired my morning after bag and the whole story with Sex in the City. And, if you listen to her, there's no more men and they all suck and we're not raising good men. Like, she's such a pessimist. It would make me laugh. And that living in New York City is like the worst place because of like the 3-to-1 ratio, and everyone wants a guy at the top. So, you said before we started recording, you went through a big breakup at 30. You realized, that you were comfortable, but that's not it. So what made you go, okay, fuck comfort, I'm going to move to the city? And how has that been as far as exploring that side of yourself?
Yeah. And I first did like a brief stint in LA. Like I spent 6 months in LA, and then I've been in New York now for almost 6 years. Much of that in a pandemic. So first thing is, I had been in relationships from when I was 16 to 31, pretty much nonstop. I had like not been single. And so the first thing I had to do was actually stop dating. Like I had been in 5 back-to-back long-term relationships. I had to stop dating. And that was number one, because I realized I had never had that like the experience of like really doing things my own way. I felt super independent, but at the end of the day, I was always like tethered to someone,
Was that hard to stop, to be like, okay, no, I'm not looking, blinders on, this is not an area?
Yeah, it was hard because it was like, I was like on Raya, and I was like, oh, look at all these cute boys, and like this chef and like this thing. It's like it was hard because I was like, oh, it was exciting. Like dating had changed a lot, between when I was 16 and 31. So it was hard, but then, but it also wasn't like I was really loving filmmaking, which I had just gotten into like a couple years before that, or so I was like really, really enjoying filmmaking. I do have like a spin on the New York thing, having been in the dating scene in New York for the last 6 years and having written about dating in places like the New York Times and The Cut, and covered it for NPR, et cetera. I actually think dating is really fun. Like I love going on dates. So I think I'm like maybe slightly broken in that way. Like I will joke sometimes to my boyfriends that I'm like, even when we're married, can we still go on like first dates with other people? But I'm kidding about that. But there's something really like, and I'm a journalist, so I do this, right? Like you're doing it, you're on these first dates with women, Rebecca, all the time on this show. But I do think New York is not the worst place it might be the worst place to date, but I like to think of it as the best place to be single. Like you can actually have a really fulfilling life in New York, single. You meet people, and I think gay men have been the proof of this, right? Like, and the community that builds around you in New York, and there is this kind of like permanent community and also like transitioning community of people constantly coming in and like, giving you new excitement and fodder. But I think New York is just a place where you can actually stay single forever if you really wanted to. And that's dangerous if you don't want to. But that's a little bit of a spin on it. I've been in, I also think it's like the place where you're going to find the men, you're going to find people, your people, men and women. And, you're going to find people that you love in New York City. And I've been in relationships here and I've had a good experience dating here. And then also the other night I was out at my friend Emmett and Margot's, friends Emmett's and Margot's new place, People's. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's like a former model who works in like private equity. And she was talking about her dating experiences. And I just like was like, you're in this dystopian world. Like the fact that you are single, this woman is like struggling to date in New York is insane,
It seems like bleak times from my team members who are single. I'm like, wow,
yeah.
This is dark. But
51% of American women now between the ages of 18 to 40 are single. And that's the all-time high. I'm part of that demo. And like I think there's something like more than 50% of women believe that they will be happier if they are not married.
Wow. Well, there goes the population. It has been achieved. Population control, done.
I think they're trying to reverse that now. Elon's trying to get the babies back.
We took that too far. Let's make marriage look like something you want to do.
Well, I do think that there's we as a generation feel like I feel this, millennial women, I think a lot of us feel like this way. It's like, were we fucked? Like, are we the fucked generation? Not just having graduated into a recession, but also we were raised to think that everybody wants an Amal Clooney. I want to tell you, not every man wants an Amal Clooney. Like, I think that resurgence of the trad wife in this generation is like not a mistake, right? I think there is a sense. Like this whole why can't women have it all? It's like, well, do you want it all?
Right.
It's exhausting.
Well, that needs to be explored more because I think that they all assumes that it's actually possible when it's not.
Yeah.
And I think in this whole feminist movement, we've demonized some of the qualities that we're just better at and made it like dirty to like do some of the homemaking things or nurturing sides of us. If you don't want to do the laundry and the dishes and the trad wife stuff, like who's your village helping you? Because that's also been shamed. You have to do it all and you have to do it all alone.
Yeah.
And that's impossible. And then women shame you because like, oh, you have help, must be nice, or you don't do the real things. It's just like, oh my God.
Yeah, there's a lot of it. I think that but a lot of these are just like massive social issues that we're trying to absorb into our like little personal lives, right? Like the whole myth of a nuclear family, right? Which is kind of an invention of the marketing class. Everybody should have their own dishwasher and their own car and their own, like the modern nuclear family has had a very short window of time of being successful until divorce rates were higher, right. than the marriage rate. So I think that that plus, Murphy Brown I think our moms grew up in like the Murphy Brown generation. And so there's this sense that has been passed on. One of the things that I'm heartened by is I think that there's a lot less scarcity mindset around women in younger generations. Like, I think there used to be this sense of there can only be one, there can be one in the boardroom. There can only be one in this. And I think now it's just like, okay, we're all in this world. And also there are many avenues to be successful. Like I have friends who, who have like decided to be full-time homemakers after going to grad school and felt a lot of shame around that. I think there's just a lot more acceptance now of that. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like my friend's kids are so wonderfully like adept. She gets beautiful time with them. Like she's an amazing homemaker. She has all kinds of interests and hobbies that she pursues. We've lost that like career couple. My parents were a career couple. My dad was at the World Bank and my mom like hosted a lot of dinners and engaged. And that was all intellectual work and strategy and also like, support and nurturing that she did. And to call that not work seems unfair too.
100%. The only thing I don't like is when women are like, I am pumping. And so I'm counting that as hours that I should be paid. And I'm like, no, you decided to feed your child. You don't stop making that about like how many hours you could have been making money. Like I don't know. That's where you lose me on the whole, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know about the
you don't know about that yet.
I did. Someone recently said to me, a former colleague at the time said to me, "Oh, maybe I feel like my husband should pay me for the babysitting." I was like, how is that going to work?
Oh my God. Doesn't work.
How's it going to work?
That's what that is.
Yeah.
I have two last questions for you.
Yes. Tell me.
Why do you think women are afraid to ask dumb questions?
I don't think it's just women. I actually think women might be better at it.
Really? Tell
Like,
me.
look at the whole men don't ask for directions thing, right?
Okay. Fair.
So I
Yes.
think there's that. I think that we are afraid. I think people are afraid to ask dumb questions because we have been trained in our society and like the compression of time and space to know everything at every moment at every time. And so the act of not knowing feels like a micro failure, you know? And the possibility that, well, you could just know it. You can defer that knowing to your own phone, to your own time, under the table, at the restaurant, or whatever it is, and not do it in conversation has changed our patterns around not knowing. But I think asking, I think just like asking the question that's in your head is a huge service. And I actually think women might be better at it. I don't know, or at least, yeah. And part of it is like, you can have your point of view on Joe Rogan, but I think part of like the success of Joe Rogan is that he's willing to just ask the question and put it out there and be curious and say, oh wow, oh wow. It's like very curious about the thing. I think that people are hungry for that because everybody has questions, and to have somebody articulate and make shows accessible rather than what a lot of interviewing is like, oh, let me tell you what I know. Let me ask you a question so I can show you that I know the answer. And let's have this conversation that a lot of people don't want to listen to because it's like boring or esoteric, or are lost in because like we haven't done the groundwork in a conversation together.
Yep. Well, hopefully I haven't asked you questions today that I know the
No,
answer to.
you're very good at that. You're not.
What is a good piece of advice that you've either received or learned in your career that you'd love to pass on?
Richard Plepler, who used to run HBO, told me this piece of advice for when to leave a job. Actually, it relates to the first question you asked me. He said, "Ask yourself 3 questions: Is it fun? Am I learning something? Do I like who I'm talking to?"
Mm.
And if the answer is no, get the
Then
fuck
you're
out.
out.
Yeah.
That's good. I think then the corollary to that is, but I can't just get out. How do I get out? Like I
Mm,
think a lot of people are like, do I start over or do I start at the bottom of a career? And I think it's hard
yeah.
with my perspective, only having done what I do for 20 years. Like
Hmm.
I can give all the advice in the world, like make a new go of it. It's not scary. And people are like, go fuck yourself. It's fucking scary. And I depend on this paycheck. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I think it is scary. I would say that you have to like get yourself ready for it. Like I really, it's one of the things is like live within your means. Obviously, I think that's like a good piece of advice that someone gave me. Like always be able to live within your means. I think that is a really important piece of financial advice that I got early on in my career, which is helped me a lot. And and you got to bet on yourself. Like, you know, you got to think about all the things that you're doing to like make a company successful or make another person successful or whatever, and then think, what if I put that work into myself, and could I like give myself a runway of 6 months to see what that would feel like and be like, I know it's scary, and it's not lost on me that like, and I think about it all the time, like especially now, and I'm like, oh, my bank account isn't clicking up at the same rate that it used to click up, and it's clicking out at the same rate, or if not higher than it used to. And I'm like, this math is not good. Close the Excel sheet. But I really think that there's a joy in like in doing what you're meant and figuring out what you're meant to do, and also in the process of ruling out things and trying things. And so a lot of these handcuffs, some of these handcuffs are real. I don't know what it's like to like have to feed a family. That's very different to my experience. But I do think some of them are self-imposed. I don't think you should ever start from the bottom. By the way, this was my big thing. When I started in filmmaking, I was like, I don't want to go be an assistant and get coffee. And I was lucky that a professor of mine at Stanford had been a double Academy Award winning filmmaker. And he actually really encouraged me to, to start writing. And then we set up a production company together. I was like in my late 20s, and like that was a great way to get started in filmmaking. But I don't think that I would avoid starting from the very bottom, because I think that um, at least I have seen this in other people, like part of the resentment that will come from having not like made a horizontal-ish career change will actually like burn you out faster. So if you have to find a way in, it's like maybe finding a smaller pond, but like making a leap that like lets you at least get in. That's why I call it a spiral staircase and not like, cliff jumping, et cetera. It's like you might not be on the same incline, but like try to grow and do the new thing.
Yep.
And it's all about people, right? It's like one person making a bet on you, right? So much of my career has been luck of somebody I've met. Like, someone came to see my film that was going to be at Tribeca from the New York Times and offered me a role there as a temp, as temp senior producer in the opinion section. And that's how I got into journalism 5 years ago.
You never know.
You never know.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
So one thing I'm trying to look at through the lens of this podcast is what is my guest solving for people in terms of what they need to know that don't know. So my last question for you will be like, what does your podcast solve for people? Like when, how does it, if they're looking for something, what is it? What do you bring them that they're like, oh, great, I needed that? Yeah.
So I think Smart Girl Dumb Questions is like in this moment of media where everything is very polarized and politicized, et cetera. Like my show is not that. It is about asking questions and not telling you what to think. It is around, I think, having some joy and delight in the process of learning together. And it's like, I call it a curiosity party in the form of a podcast. So if you want to get away and it's like dizzying, right? It's like 1 week I'm talking to Mark Cuban about our relationship to billionaires. And I'm like, why isn't the US government as good as the NBA at regulating billionaires? Like, seems weird to me. Or, then talking to Neil deGrasse Tyson and I'm like, are horoscopes real? And also like those stars my ex-boyfriend named after me, do they exist somewhere? Can I find them? So it's joyous, but it's also getting into topics that affect our world. Like what is our relationship with science as a society, right? Again, I'm not going to tell you what to think. I'm just going to be willing to ask those questions and put them out there. Because I know, I really believe people are more curious and more open-minded than modern media gives credit for. Yeah. Modern media is not a monolith. I've been in it and worked in various news organizations through it. But I think that people don't trust the news anymore. And I'm trying to create something that they can trust because it is not, didactic or pedantic or telling you what to think. It is experiential and entertaining.
I love it. I can't wait to listen. I was watching some clips before this. So I saw the Mark Cuban one and I'm like, there was too many questions he could not answer. Like, open up your fucking WhatsApp and tell me who these billionaires are, Mark.
He is on a secret billionaire signal group. By the way, I hope that they haven't like accidentally let in a journalist. That's what I should have asked him to accidentally let me in.
Was your yacht gas prices $1 million last week? That's what mine was. Oh my God.
Oh my gosh, to live that life. But he's such a good guy. He actually answered. I feel like the clip editor does that. They like create the suspense.
Oh, of course they have to. Because then I was like, I gotta listen to it. Yes.
So people can find me. I'm at Nayeema Raza on Instagram. My podcast is called Smart Girl Dumb Questions. You can find out on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your content. And yeah, that's where I am.
I love it. I just wanted to thank you guys for listening to today's episode. I also want to ask you to rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts. I know it's a pain in the butt, but it actually helps with search and algorithms. So if you love this podcast, it is an easy way to get it more visible and out there. I also want you to follow me on Instagram at Rebecca Minkoff, at RMSuperwomen, and be sure to check out my book, Fearless, The New Rules for Unlocking Creativity, Courage, and Success. Thank you again, and you will hear from me next week.